It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people knew each other and days passed slowly. In one of the small houses at the end of the street lived a boy named Eli. He was only 10, but there was something different about him. He had been blind since birth. While other children ran through the streets chasing balls or riding their bikes, Eli spent his days surrounded by sounds. The world for him wasn't made of colors and light, but of footsteps, laughter, the rustling of trees, and above all, music. Every morning, he would sit by the window with his small radio, turning the dial until he found the local classical music station. The moment the piano played through those old speakers, he smiled. The sound wasn't just pleasant to him. It was alive. Each note painted pictures in his mind. Soft skies, gentle rain, waves, and sometimes faces he imagined. His mother often watched him quietly from the kitchen. She worked long hours at a small diner, yet every time she saw Eli tilt his head toward the music, a small peace filled her heart. Life hadn't been easy for them since Eli's father left years ago, but the boy never complained. He had a calm soul, one that somehow made his mother feel everything was going to be okay. One evening, as the sun went down and the world outside turned still, Eli heard something that changed him forever. Someone nearby was playing a real piano, not on the radio, but live. The sound came from across the street, from the old building that used to be a community center. The door was open, and the melody floated through the cool air. Eli's whole body froze. He stood up, felt for his cane, and followed the sound. Step by step, he crossed the small path, guided only by the rhythm of the notes. His mother called out behind him, but he kept walking, drawn like a moth to light. When he reached the doorway, he stopped. He could feel the vibration of the instrument through the wooden floor. "Who's there?" a woman's voice asked gently. Eli smiled shyly. "I heard the music. It sounds beautiful." The woman laughed softly. "You like piano, huh?" "I love it," he said. "It feels like it's talking." She didn't understand exactly what he meant, but something in his voice caught her attention. She was a music teacher who had been giving lessons to children in the neighborhood for years. She invited him inside, guided his hands to the edge of the piano, and let him feel the keys. "This is where the music comes from," she said. Eli's fingers trembled as he touched the keys for the first time. The smooth surface felt cold and mysterious. He pressed one key carefully, and a soft note filled the air. His face lit up instantly. "That's how you make sound?" he asked in awe. The teacher smiled. "Yes, each key is a sound. Together they make songs." That night, Eli couldn't stop thinking about the piano. Even after he went home, the notes replayed in his head over and over again. When his mother came to tuck him into bed, he whispered, "Mom, can I learn to play the piano someday?" She sat beside him and brushed her hand through his hair. "It's expensive, sweetheart, and lessons aren't cheap either." "I can learn without seeing," he said softly. "I can feel the music." Her heart ached at his words. She wanted to say yes right then, but she also knew how tight money was. Still, she couldn't ignore the spark she'd heard in his voice. It wasn't a passing wish. It was something deeper. That night, as she lay in bed, she made herself a silent promise. Somehow, she would find a way. Weeks passed, and Eli's obsession only grew stronger. Every time they walked past the community center, he slowed down, listening carefully to the students practicing inside. He could identify songs just by their first few notes. Sometimes, he'd hum along, matching each melody perfectly, as if he had been born knowing them. One afternoon, the music teacher from the center stopped by their house. She told Eli's mother that she had noticed his deep connection with sound. "There's something rare about him," she said. "He doesn't just hear the notes, he feels them. I've seen that kind of instinct only in very gifted people." Eli's mother looked embarrassed. "I wish I could afford lessons for him," she admitted. "But things are hard right now." The teacher smiled kindly. "Let him come to a few classes for free, just to see if he really wants to learn. If he's serious, maybe we'll figure something out later." Eli's mother was speechless. That small act of kindness lit a new hope inside her. She hugged her son tightly that evening and whispered, "You're going to play the piano, Eli." The following week, he attended his first class. The room smelled like wood and polish. He could hear other children laughing and the faint echoes of pianos being tuned. When he sat down in front of one for the first time, he could barely breathe. The teacher guided his hands to middle C and explained where each note lived. First, it was hard. His fingers didn't always land where he expected. Sometimes he pressed the wrong keys and the notes clashed. But he never grew frustrated. He listened carefully, again and again, adjusting his touch until the sound matched what he imagined in his head. He practiced scales by ear, memorizing every key through touch. The other students were amazed by how quickly he learned. Some laughed softly at his blindness, but others began to admire him. He never responded to teasing, he just smiled and kept practicing. Every day after school, he'd sit at the piano for hours, repeating exercises until his fingers hurt. The teacher once asked if he ever got tired. Eli shook his head and said, "Music doesn't make me tired, it makes me see." His words stunned her. She often watched him play with her hands folded, realizing she was witnessing something special. At home, his mother would listen to him practice with tears in her eyes. Their small house, once quiet and lonely, was now filled with music. Neighbors passing by would stop and listen from outside the window. Some even said, "That blind boy plays like he's talking to the piano." One day, the teacher announced that there would be a recital, a small performance where all students would play something they learned. Eli's heart raced with excitement. But later, when his mother heard about it, worry crept into her voice. "Are you sure you want to do that?" she asked. "It's in front of a crowd." Eli smiled. "I won't see them, Mom. I'll just hear the piano." The night of the recital arrived. Families filled the small hall, clapping for each performer. When Eli's name was called, a hush fell over the room. He walked slowly to the stage, feeling for the piano bench. The teacher whispered encouragement into his ear, and he nodded. Then he began to play. The first few notes were shaky, but soon his hands found their rhythm. The melody filled the air with warmth and emotion. Every person in the audience leaned forward, drawn by the pure, heartfelt sound. It wasn't perfect. A few keys slipped, but it was full of soul. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Eli smiled shyly, not seeing the tears in his mother's eyes or the proud look on his teacher's face. All he knew was that the piano had spoken to him, and he had answered back. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, his mother whispered, "You did it, Eli. You really did it." He grinned. "It felt like the piano was talking to me, Mom, like it was alive." She squeezed his hand. Maybe it was, sweetheart. Maybe it was. But what neither of them knew that night was that this small performance would be the start of something much bigger. A journey that would one day take him far beyond their little town, into places neither of them could have ever imagined. Because deep inside that small, blind boy was a light no one could dim. A belief that music wasn't just something to listen to, but something to live. And no matter who tried to silence it, that sound was only going to grow louder. Eli's days had grown brighter since the first time he touched the piano. Each day after school, he rushed to the community center, eager to feel the keys beneath his fingers and hear the music come alive. He had started learning not only the notes, but the emotions behind each song. The way a soft touch could make a note sound like a whisper, or a strong strike could make it roar. Every practice session felt like discovering a new world. But even as his talent grew, the world around him sometimes felt harsh and unfair. People saw only what he couldn't do, the fact that he was blind. They didn't always notice the fire in his heart or the way he could make the piano sing. At home, his mother encouraged him endlessly, but outside, the whispers followed him like shadows. One day, the community center announced a chance for students to meet a famous pianist who was visiting their city. It was a rare opportunity. Eli's heart raced when he heard the news. "Can I go?" he asked his mother. She hesitated, thinking of the cost, the distance, and how the pianist might react to a blind boy. "I don't know," she said softly. "But Maybe it's worth a try. Just be yourself. Eli barely slept the night before the meeting. He imagined what it would be like to sit in front of someone so skilled, someone whose hands had danced over hundreds of pianos. He thought about showing the pianist how he could play, hoping for a smile, maybe even a word of encouragement. When the day finally arrived, Eli walked into the grand music hall with his cane tapping lightly on the polished floor. The sound echoed, mixing with the notes of a rehearsal already in progress. Eli could feel the excitement in the air, the hum of instruments, the chatter of students. The pianist was there, a tall, sharp-eyed man who had performed all over the world. He looked confident, almost intimidating. Eli's stomach twisted with nerves. The teacher guided him toward the front, and Eli took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he had dreamed about for months. When it was his turn, Eli stepped up and touched the piano. His fingers found middle C, just like his teacher had taught him. Then, with a quiet breath, he began to play. At first, the notes trembled, small and uncertain, but soon they grew stronger. He played a simple piece he had practiced countless times. Each note carried his heart, a mix of hope, longing, and determination. For a moment, it felt like the world had vanished, leaving only him and the music. But then, a sharp voice cut through the melody. "Stop!" Eli froze, his fingers hovering over the keys. The pianist was looking down at him, his expression unreadable. "You're blind," the man said, his tone harsh. "You'll never be able to perform on a real stage. Playing the piano like this, it's not for someone like you." Eli's chest tightened. He had imagined criticism before, but he had not expected this. He had imagined encouragement, guidance, maybe even a small smile. But these words felt like a wall, cold and solid, separating him from his dream. He looked at the pianist, then back at the keys, unsure what to do. The world seemed heavier now, as if every note he played carried a weight it hadn't before. He could hear the whispers from other students, some curious, some skeptical. But he didn't move. He just stayed there, letting the silence grow. After a long moment, Eli's teacher stepped forward. "He's learning," she said softly, defending him. "He has talent. He just needs guidance." The pianist shook his head. "Talent won't fix this. He doesn't see. He won't make it. Trust me. I've seen this before." Eli's mother, standing at the back, felt her stomach churn. She wanted to step forward, to tell the pianist he was wrong, to protect her son. But she stayed quiet, knowing that Eli needed to hear the world's doubts and rise above them on his own. Eli nodded silently, his small hands brushing over the keys. He didn't say anything. He didn't cry. He simply walked out of the hall, guided by his teacher, feeling a mix of hurt and determination. That night, he sat at his old keyboard at home, the words of the pianist echoing in his mind. "You'll never be able to perform." But instead of giving up, something inside him shifted. The words stung, yes, but they also ignited a fire. He realized that if someone could doubt him so openly, it meant he had a chance to prove them wrong. If it were easy, it wouldn't matter. The world had given him a challenge, and he was determined to meet it. From that night on, Eli practiced more than ever. He played in the dark, closing his eyes even tighter to trust his memory and his heart. He recorded himself with a small tape recorder and listened over and over, learning from every mistake. Every wrong note became a lesson, every stumble a stepping stone. At school, some children noticed his dedication. They would hear him humming a new melody during recess or tapping out rhythms on his desk. Some of them began to admire his persistence. Even when they couldn't understand how he could play without seeing, they respected the way he never gave up. Eli's mother did what she could to support him. She would sit beside him as he practiced late into the night, offering encouragement and helping him navigate through new songs. She didn't have a musical background, but she understood something more important. She understood belief. She knew her son's spirit was strong, unbreakable, and that sometimes the world's harsh words were simply obstacles meant to be overcome. One afternoon, Eli sat in his room, headphones on, listening to a recording of the pianist who had told him he could never perform. Instead of feeling hurt, he felt a strange calm. He closed his eyes and imagined himself on a stage, his fingers flying over the keys, the audience hanging on every note. He imagined the pianist watching, perhaps surprised, perhaps even proud. The next day, he returned to the community center. The teacher noticed a new intensity in his playing. "You've changed," she said. "There's more power in your hands now." Eli smiled. "I just want to get better," he said quietly. "I want to play like it matters." And in a way it did matter, more than ever. Each note he played was not just a song. It was a statement. It was a declaration that he would not be defined by his blindness, by anyone else's doubts, or by the world's limitations. Music was his voice, and he was determined to make it heard. Months passed, and Eli's skills grew at an incredible pace. He learned complex pieces that most children his age would find difficult. He memorized each note by ear, using his hands to feel the patterns and his memory to map the sounds. He began to experiment with his own melodies, composing songs that expressed his feelings and dreams. Word of his talent began to spread quietly. Neighbors who once saw only a blind boy now saw a young musician with unmatched determination. They would stop by to listen as he played, and some even offered to help in small ways, lending sheet music in Braille, offering tips, or simply cheering him on. Through it all, Eli remained humble. He knew he still had much to learn. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. But he also knew something important, that no matter what anyone said, no one could take his music away. And so, the boy who had once been told he could never perform continued to play, day after day, building a quiet strength that would one day lead him to stages far larger than he could imagine. Each note was a victory, each melody a triumph over doubt. Eli was no longer just learning music. He was learning to rise above the world's limitations, to turn every harsh word into fuel for his dreams. And though the pianist's words still echoed in his mind, they no longer hurt. They were no longer barriers. They had become a challenge, a reason to push harder, to reach further, and to show the world that talent, courage, and heart could not be measured by sight alone. Eli's world had grown bigger, though the streets and houses around him stayed the same. He carried a quiet determination that seemed to hum inside him, like a melody waiting to burst into the air. After the encounter with the famous pianist who had doubted him, Eli no longer looked for approval from others. Instead, he turned his attention fully to the piano, letting it become not only his teacher but his closest friend. He started waking earlier each morning, before the sun touched the rooftops. With his small keyboard in his room and his old piano at the community center, he practiced scales and melodies tirelessly. Each note he played, each pattern he memorized, felt like unlocking a hidden door in his mind. Some nights, he would lie awake imagining songs in his head, playing entire pieces mentally before even touching the keys. Eli's fingers became nimble, almost as if they could feel the music before his brain even thought it. He learned to distinguish the tiniest changes in tone, a note slightly sharper than the last, the way one chord could make the air vibrate differently. His sense of hearing sharpened so much that even the creak of a floorboard or the rustle of a page turned nearby could be woven into a rhythm. Music became not just something he played but something he felt in every fiber of his being. At school, the other children began noticing his new confidence. He no longer flinched when they whispered behind his back. When they asked him to hum a tune or tap a rhythm, he would do it with a quiet, steady assurance. Even though he could not see their reactions, he could feel respect in the way they listened. Some were curious, some skeptical, but he had learned not to care. The piano had taught him something more important, that his own belief mattered more than anyone else's opinion. One afternoon, the teacher at the community center handed him a book of classical pieces in Braille. Eli had never read music before. He had always relied on memory and ear, but this new challenge excited him. He traced each raised dot with his fingertips, learning to feel the rhythm and pitch before even playing the notes. It was difficult at first. Mistakes happened constantly, and frustration sometimes crept in like a shadow. But he refused to give up. Slowly, carefully, he began to master the pieces. He also started experimenting on his own, creating small melodies that had never existed before. Sometimes, He would sit at the piano late into the night, improvising while the house slept. The notes would float through the room, weaving stories he could not put into words. His mother often passed by, listening quietly, amazed at how rich and deep the music had become. It was no longer just practice. It was Eli speaking from his heart, telling his own story in a language everyone could feel, even if they couldn't see him. Despite his progress, Eli never forgot the words that had hurt him most. "You'll never be able to perform." At first, the memory stung like a raw wound, but over time he turned it into fuel. He played as if he were proving not only to the world but to himself that talent could not be limited by sight. He imagined standing on a stage, the lights bright above him, the audience hushed, and the same pianist watching him. What would it feel like to hear someone who doubted him now applauding his music? That thought alone pushed him harder than anything else. Word of Eli's talent slowly began to spread beyond the community center. A neighbor, impressed by his dedication, mentioned it to a local radio host. Soon, Eli was invited to play at a small local event. It was a humble stage in a tiny hall, but for Eli it felt enormous. He sat in front of the piano, hands trembling slightly, and began to play. His fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion, each note full of depth. People who had never imagined a blind child could play this way were left speechless. By the time he finished, there was applause, tears, and whispers of admiration. The event gave Eli a new sense of purpose. He realized that his music could touch people in ways words never could. He could tell a story, make someone laugh or cry, all without speaking a single sentence. Music had become his voice, and now, slowly, the world was starting to listen. Yet, even with recognition, Eli's journey was far from easy. Practicing for hours was exhausting. Sometimes his fingers ached, and his back would grow sore from sitting at the piano for so long. But he endured because each effort brought him closer to a dream he had nurtured since the first time he heard a piano in his neighborhood. Each day, he reminded himself that no one else could feel the music exactly as he did. Blindness did not take away his ability to touch hearts. If anything, it had sharpened it. At home, his mother became his quiet partner in this journey. She would help him learn new songs, guide his fingers when needed, and encourage him when doubt crept in. She often said, "Eli, you may not see the world with your eyes, but your heart sees far more than most." Those words were simple, yet they fueled him more than any applause or recognition ever could. Eli also began reaching out to other children who struggled with learning music. He discovered that teaching them, guiding their hands, and sharing the ways he adapted to the piano brought him joy. It was as if he was giving back the gift he had been given, the understanding that music was a language everyone could learn, no matter their limitations. His own challenges made him patient and compassionate. He realized that talent was not just about skill. It was about persistence, patience, and the willingness to keep going when others had given up. Despite all his progress, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes he would hear snippets of conversation or whispers that reminded him of that famous pianist's words. "He'll never perform." For a brief moment, his confidence wavered, and he would wonder if the world was right, if there was a limit he could not overcome. But then he would sit at the piano, close his eyes, and let the music remind him who he was. With every chord, every melody, the doubts melted away. He realized the power was not in others' opinions but in his own determination to keep going. One day, Eli's teacher at the community center brought exciting news. "There's a national competition for young pianists coming up," she said, her voice full of excitement. "It's a big opportunity. You could show your talent to a much larger audience." Eli's heart skipped. He had never imagined anything like this. A competition on a national stage? The thought was thrilling, but it also scared him. The memory of the pianist's harsh words returned. Could he face a stage full of people, including those who might doubt him? Could he perform in front of an audience that didn't know him, that might only see his blindness and not his music? He spent the next few days thinking, weighing fear against excitement. His mother noticed his hesitation. She took his hand and said gently, "Eli, you've been working for this your whole life. Fear is normal, but don't let it stop you. The music you carry is yours, and it's meant to be shared. Her words strengthened him. He realized that this was exactly the kind of challenge he needed. This was the moment to prove to himself, not just to the world, that he could rise above every limitation. So Eli began preparing. He practiced tirelessly, memorizing pieces by heart, refining every note, every pause, every emotion. He experimented with dynamics, learning how to make the piano whisper or roar, to carry joy or sadness. He pushed himself to imagine what a live audience would feel, practicing with his eyes closed, pretending the room was filled with listeners. As the competition approached, Eli's confidence grew, but so did his nerves. He knew the stakes were high. He knew that the world might still judge him for what he could not see. But he also knew that the music in his hands, the melody in his heart, was stronger than fear. It was a part of him that no one could take away. And so, the blind boy who had once been told he would never perform continued to work, creating music that was rich, emotional, and full of life. Each day brought him closer to the stage, to the moment where his dreams and efforts would finally meet the world. Each note he played was a testament to his determination, a silent declaration that talent and heart could never be limited by sight. Eli had come a long way from the small boy who first touched the piano in a community center. He had learned patience, resilience, and the incredible power of persistence. And though he did not yet know what the future held, one thing was certain: his music would not stay hidden. It would reach others, touch hearts, and carry his story forward, proving that dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem, can become reality with courage, effort, and unwavering belief. The day of the national competition arrived, and Eli's heart was a mix of nerves and excitement. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. The hall was enormous, with rows of seats stretching far beyond what he could imagine. There were bright lights hanging overhead, a polished stage that reflected the faint glow of the spotlights, and the hum of people finding their seats. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers, and the quiet tuning of instruments. Eli held his mother's hand as they walked through the entrance. She had taken time off work to be with him, knowing this was more than just a competition. It was the next step in a journey that had started years ago with a single note in a quiet neighborhood. She squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "You've prepared for this. Remember, the music is yours." He nodded, taking a deep breath. The familiar rhythm of the piano waiting for him backstage seemed to call to him. His fingers itched to touch the keys, to let the notes flow, to speak without words. He had practiced tirelessly for months, memorized every piece, and imagined every possible scenario. Yet nothing could completely erase the flutter of nerves that danced in his chest. The other participants had arrived as well, young pianists from all over the country. Eli could hear their fingers tapping on keys during warm-ups, the soft rustle of sheet music, and the occasional murmur of parents offering encouragement. Some of the children laughed nervously, others were focused, adjusting their posture and stretching their hands. Eli felt the familiar quiet resolve settle inside him. He didn't need to see them. He only needed to hear the music in his heart. When it was finally his turn, Eli was guided to the grand piano on stage. He ran his fingers along the smooth keys, finding middle C, just as he always did. The lights above made the room feel immense, and the audience seemed endless, but he focused only on the keys under his hands, the familiar touch, the vibrations that felt like home. The judges, seated at the front, were waiting. One of them, the same pianist who had told him years ago that he would never perform, was sitting among them. Eli's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't let it stop him. He took a deep breath, imagining that stage in his mind, and let the music take over. His fingers began to move. The first notes were gentle, soft, almost like a whisper to the audience, drawing them in slowly. Then the melody began to build, each chord carrying emotion, hope, struggle, triumph. A story told without words. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the depth and intensity of the music. They didn't see Eli's blindness. They only felt his talent, his passion. His determination poured into every note. As he played, Eli imagined every teacher, neighbor, and supporter who had believed in him along the way. He remembered sitting alone at his keyboard late at night, imagining an audience that might one day hear him. He thought of his mother, of the community center, of every small victory that had brought him here. Each memory added weight and beauty to the music, making it richer, fuller, and alive. The judges were silent. The pianist, who had doubted him, leaned forward, listening intently, his expression changing with each passing note. Eli could not see him, but he could feel the tension in the room, the focus of the audience, and the weight of the moment. He didn't play for approval or recognition. He played because this was who he was. The music was no longer practice, no longer preparation. It was Eli speaking with every fiber of his being. The final notes of the piece lingered in the air, soft but powerful, like a message that refused to be ignored. The hall remained quiet for a heartbeat longer before the applause began. It started slowly, polite at first, then grew louder, filling the room with energy and awe. People were on their feet, cheering, clapping, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Eli's fingers hovered above the keys, catching the vibrations of the crowd, feeling the excitement, but remaining calm. Then the moment came when he became aware that the pianist who had doubted him was moving toward the stage. The man's steps were slow, deliberate. Eli felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. He wondered what the pianist would say, whether he would dismiss him again, or if something had changed. When the pianist reached the stage, he stopped in front of Eli. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that stretches and holds a person's breath. Then he spoke, his voice low but steady. I was wrong, he said. You didn't just perform. You made the piano sing. I didn't believe it was possible, but you proved me wrong. Eli blinked, though he could not see the expression on the man's face. The words were like sunlight breaking through clouds. After years of doubt and struggle, he felt a quiet sense of vindication. It wasn't just about proving someone wrong. It was about showing the world, and himself, the power of perseverance and belief. The audience erupted again, louder this time, as the pianist stepped back, nodding with respect. Eli's mother rushed to the stage, tears streaming down her face, wrapping him in a hug. You did it, she whispered. I knew you would. Eli smiled, feeling a rush of emotion he could not put into words. All the practice, all the late nights, all the moments of doubt and frustration had led to this. And though the applause and recognition were overwhelming, the most important feeling was the quiet knowledge that he had stayed true to himself, that he had followed the music in his heart no matter what anyone said. In the days that followed, videos of the performance began to spread online. People were amazed, inspired, and moved by the story of the blind boy who had been told he would never perform and had risen above it. Comments flooded in from around the country. Teachers, musicians, and strangers all sharing their admiration. Eli became a symbol of hope, a reminder that talent and determination could overcome even the harshest words. But for Eli, the moment was never about fame. It was about music, about expression, about proving to himself that his abilities were limitless. Every note he played, every song he created, was a statement of resilience and courage. The recognition was secondary. The music was primary. He continued to practice, to compose, to teach others who struggled with challenges of their own. His story inspired young musicians, especially those with disabilities, showing them that limitations were often only barriers in the mind. And though he had reached a major milestone, Eli knew that his journey was far from over. There were still stages to conquer, pieces to master, and melodies yet to create. The experience also changed the way he viewed the world. Eli realized that doubt, criticism, and obstacles were not always enemies. Sometimes they were catalysts, challenges that forced him to grow stronger, to work harder, and to believe in himself even when no one else did. That understanding became the foundation of his music, giving it depth and authenticity that no practice alone could achieve. As he continued on his path, Eli never forgot the lessons of his past. He remembered the first piano he had touched, the small community center that had nurtured him, and the teacher who had believed in him when others had doubted. Those experiences shaped not only his music but also his character, teaching him humility, patience, and gratitude. And so, the blind boy who had once been told he could never perform had stepped onto a national stage and shown the world his heart. The music that flowed from his fingers was not just a performance. It was a triumph of spirit, a testament to the power of belief, and a promise of even greater things to come. From that day on, every note Eli played carried more than sound. It carried a story, a message, and a reminder that dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, could be achieved with determination, resilience, and a heart that refused to give up. After the national competition, Eli's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. The applause, the praise, and the recognition he received that day were unlike anything he had experienced before, but they were only a part of the journey. What mattered most to him was the feeling inside, the knowledge that he had followed his heart, trusted his music, and refused to give up, even when the world doubted him. News outlets picked up his story, sharing it as an inspiring tale of determination and courage. Local newspapers ran articles about the blind boy who had conquered the stage, and videos of his performance spread across social media. People from different cities, even other countries, reached out with messages of support, admiration, and sometimes their own stories of overcoming challenges. Eli couldn't read most of the comments on his own, but his mother would read them aloud, smiling and sometimes wiping away tears as she shared the words of encouragement. Even with all the attention, Eli remained humble. He continued his routine, practicing at the community center every day, composing music, and exploring new ways to express emotion through his piano. The national stage had been a milestone, but it was not the end. Music was a lifelong journey, and Eli had only just begun to explore the depths of his own abilities. One afternoon, a young boy came to the community center, timid and shy, standing near the doorway. He had a small notebook in his hands and a nervous look in his eyes. Eli noticed him immediately, sensing both curiosity and hesitation. The boy was blind just like him. Eli walked over, guiding the boy to the piano. "Do you play?" he asked gently. The boy shook his head. I want to, but people say I can't." Eli smiled softly, remembering the words he had once heard that had hurt him so deeply. "I understand," he said. "I've been told the same thing. But you know what? You can learn. You just have to try and never give up." The boy's eyes lit up, and he sat at the piano with Eli guiding his hands to the keys. Together, they explored the sounds, the vibrations, the rhythms. Eli could feel the boy's excitement and nervousness, and he realized how far he had come. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a mentor, someone who could give hope to another child who might have been told they couldn't succeed. Over the next few months, Eli devoted time to teaching other children who faced challenges of their own. He showed them how to feel the music, how to trust their ears, and how to let their hearts guide their fingers. He discovered a new kind of joy in sharing what he had learned. The music that had once been his own escape became a bridge for others, connecting hearts, breaking barriers, and inspiring confidence. The pianist who had doubted him years ago reached out after seeing Eli's viral performance. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had underestimated the boy, and that Eli's music had touched him in a way he could never forget. When they met, the pianist watched Eli play again, this time with admiration and humility. "You've done something remarkable," he said, "not just for music, but for everyone who thought limits could define them." Eli nodded quietly, not needing to say more. The validation was not what drove him. It was the music itself, the joy of creation, and the opportunity to inspire others. But the meeting left him with a sense of closure, a moment to recognize how far he had come. Over time, Eli's reputation as a gifted pianist and mentor grew. He was invited to perform at concerts, collaborate with other musicians, and speak at events about overcoming challenges. But he never let the attention change him. He remembered the small community center, the nights spent practicing alone, the early mornings filled with imagination and determination. Those moments, more than any applause, had shaped him, and he honored them in everything he did. At home, His mother continued to support him with the same quiet dedication she had shown from the beginning. She would sit and listen to his compositions, sometimes offering suggestions, sometimes just absorbing the music. She had always believed in him, even when others doubted, and she took pride not only in his talent but in his heart, his patience, and his kindness. One evening, Eli composed a piece inspired by his journey, the doubts, the challenges, the victories, and the people who had helped him along the way. It was a long, flowing melody, filled with emotion and depth, something that spoke of struggle and triumph without a single word. He played it for his mother first, letting her feel the story through the music. She held his hands after the last note, tears shining in her eyes. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "It's you, and everything you've been through." Eli smiled softly. "It's the story of all of us," he said, "of anyone who has ever been told they couldn't do something. Music, it lets us show them we can." The piece became one of his most celebrated works. Audiences were moved not just by his skill, but by the honesty and emotion embedded in every note. People felt his story through the music, understanding that talent, courage, and heart could overcome any obstacle. Through it all, Eli remained focused on one truth: that music was more than performance. It was expression, connection, and resilience. Every child he taught, every audience he touched, every note he played carried that message. And in each moment, he remembered the boy he had once been, small, uncertain, yet full of dreams that refused to be silenced. Years later, Eli returned to the community center where it had all begun. The building had changed slightly, but the piano remained, worn but steady. He sat at the keys and played a piece from memory, the same piece he had first performed there. The notes floated through the room, echoing against the walls, carrying the journey of a boy who had been told he would never perform and had proven the world wrong. Children gathered around, some blind, some not, listening and feeling the music. Eli guided their hands, shared their excitement, and encouraged their curiosity. The room, once quiet and ordinary, was now alive with sound, laughter, and dreams being formed. He realized that his journey was not just about his own accomplishments, but about inspiring others to believe in themselves, no matter the challenges they faced. Eli's story became a symbol, a story shared at schools, music programs, and events for children with disabilities. People spoke of the boy who had refused to let doubt define him, who had turned every criticism into motivation, and who had used his talent to inspire an entire generation. But Eli knew the truth. It had never been about recognition, applause, or fame. It had been about music, about heart, and about the courage to keep moving forward when others said it was impossible. That lesson stayed with him every day, guiding him as he continued to create, teach, and perform. And so, the blind boy who had once been told he could never play the piano grew into a man whose music touched hearts around the world. Every note he played carried the message that dreams are worth pursuing, that talent cannot be limited by sight, and that courage and perseverance can turn even the harshest doubts into triumphs. Eli's journey was complete, yet it was only the beginning. Through his music, his teaching, and his story, he continued to inspire, to challenge, and to remind the world that no obstacle is too great when your heart believes, your hands are willing, and your spirit refuses to give up. He had faced doubt, disappointment, and fear, and he had risen above it all. His music spoke for him, for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't, and for every dreamer who refused to quit. In the end, it was not just the applause or recognition that mattered. It was the knowledge that he had lived his truth, followed his passion, and left a legacy of hope, courage, and music that would echo far beyond his own life.